Circulatory System, Lesson 4.3, Review. So this is just going to be a quick recap and review of what we have learned so far about the circulatory system and all the little subcategories in between. So firstly, what have we learned so far? So if you think back to 4.1, which was the really big lesson, we learned a bunch of different things about the circulatory system, the lymphatic system, how blood travels throughout the heart, and the different types of circulation. So the heart's main function is to pump blood throughout the body. So remember all the different things that we learned about. Essentially, all of your organs need blood, and the only way that it gets to those organs is by the heart. And nothing actually tells the heart to pump blood. It knows because of its muscle memory. There are three components to any circulatory system: a pump, fluid, and vessels. So now if you think about it, what's the pump in a human system? The heart. The fluid, the blood, and the vessels are things like the veins, arteries, and capillaries. Our blood is made up of 45% formed elements and 55% liquid. So the formed elements are things like our blood cells, and the liquid part is the plasma. The three types of blood cells are red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So remember, red blood cells' job is to deliver oxygen to our body and other cells. White blood cells are there to help fight infection or disease, and platelets help with clotting. Then if we start to break down a little bit more of the structure of the heart, it breaks down into sort of two sides, the left and the right. And some people, remember, they say it's described as sort of two organs where the two types of blood, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, never mix. The two main valves are the atrioventricular and the semilunar, and then they have their own parts to those. The two types of blood, like we talked about, are the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, and it goes from left to right. And if you remember, arteries start with an A, so they carry blood away from the heart, and veins carry blood towards the heart. And then now we have a little bit of a diagram of how our blood flows. So here is just that same screenshot from the 4.1 video of the circulation path. So we start through the superior vena cava, we go to the right atrium, through the right ventricle, the pulmonary artery, then we go to the lungs, which is essentially gas exchange, through the capillaries, the left atrium, the left ventricle, and then down through the aorta, and then the aorta sends the blood to the rest of the body. So here's just a little bit more of a bigger, more detailed diagram of the flow in the heart. So of course, like we said before, we start off at the superior vena cava. We come down through here, and then we enter the right atrium. And remember, our valves are the things that control sort of like the backflow and the flow. So like, remember, like the water tap, you turn it on, you turn it off. So then we have the tricuspid valve. We come down over here into the right ventricle, and then it goes out. On the other side, we have the pulmonary vein where blood enters. It comes down over here, which is the mitral valve, again, our valves. And then we have, it's this whole section down here is the left ventricle, and then it comes up through here, which is the aortic valve. And then up here where the blood travels and goes out from is the aorta. And we have all these different locations like the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, the pulmonary vein, and the pulmonary artery, all where blood is entering and exiting from. So now, lastly, we have 4.2, which we talked about the electrical pathways of the heart. So we talked about, of course, the sinus node, which is the SA node. Then it goes down into the atrioventricular node, or the AV node. Remember, there's a slight pause there to allow for the actual spark to happen. And then it breaks down into the bundle of His. So we have the left bundle and the right bundle, and they each have their own Purkinje fibers. And remember, essentially what this is the little signals that the heart sends to tell the other parts what to do. And the way we can see this or take a closer look at this is through things like an EKG or your heart rhythm when you go to the doctor's office. And when they take an EKG, they're looking at abnormalities or how your rhythm functions. So like if you flatline, they're going to be able to see that because there's no more electrical signals. In this lesson, we also talked a little bit about open systems and closed systems in the heart. And if you remember, open systems are more like a bug or like the cricket. So essentially, their organs are just bathing in the blood, whereas in humans, everything is closed off, and we actually have a pump and vessels for the blood to travel in, and our organs are not just floating in the blood. So now we have a small quiz to recap the circulatory system. You can pause the video here, and I'll give you a quick second to answer the questions, and we'll take them up. Okay, so what keeps the blood from flowing backwards into the atria? So I don't have a diagram handy here, but if you were to look at a diagram, you would see that it was actually the atrioventricular valve that keeps, remember, that backflow, if you think of valves like that. And then the sinus node controls our heart rate. And if you go back to that lesson, it's specifically our resting heart rate. So remember, we called it the pacemaker. So what happens during diasystole? So if you go all the way back to 4.1, you remember there's systole and diasystole. And essentially what happens during diasystole is our atria fills up with blood. So that's that first part when the actual atria is filling up with blood, and then when it contracts, it's going to obviously go out. And then the last one is platelets released a chemical called, so essentially, do you remember what platelets are called? They're called thrombocytes. So it's going to be a little bit in the name. That's how I remember it. So it's this one down here. And that's it. That's essentially the recap on the circulatory system. Thank you for watching.